lied on his security clearance form right before he signed that thing that said any lies on this security form are a felony.
Well, at least I didn't tackle a Jew reporter. Am I right? Anyone?
The CBO score is out on repeal and replace. 23 millions will lose health care. Millions more will have fake insurance. Monument suit gets a boost as Trump organization not even keeping track of those foreign profits that they're supposed to donate to the Treasury Department.
Oh, yeah, totally. Track.
Meanwhile, Uber's business model of abusing drivers and breaking laws seems to be crumbling. And reformists win big in Iranian elections. Trump stank rubbing off on Mike Pence. Also, his poor polling numbers also rubbing off on Mike Pence. Thousands march in Chicago for a $15 minimum wage. And 2 more leaks found along the Dakota Access Pipeline. All this and more, ladies and gentlemen, on today's program. David Dayen was in studio just moments ago. He had another appointment, so we pre-taped it, but you will see him live in studio, except for it won't be live. It'll appear live to you. It'll sound live to you. But indeed, no.
Bless you.
No, he will not be actually in a studio with us. We will get to those CBO numbers. I mean, the bottom line is it is a total crap show. This repeal and replace. I guess relative to the last one, they put in an extra $8 billion, which supposedly will keep 1/24. That would be 5%, 4% improvement on the bill from where it was last time. So only 23 million Americans will lose their health care. But, and I don't want to say but, the hardest hit will be those who are older and sicker. And the rest of us, even if you are, I mean, here's the amazing thing, and David and I touch on this. Even if you're not involved in the Obamacare health exchanges, even if you put aside the patient protections that impact everybody's health insurance, the fact that if you have a pre-existing condition, you cannot be denied care, the fact that there are no such things anymore as annual caps or lifetime caps, the fact that it's illegal for the insurance company to just say, you know what, we don't want to be in the business with you anymore now that you've been hurt. We're just going to get rid of your insurance under something called rescission. The fact that you get essential care benefits from health insurance, that we all benefit from that aspect of it. Even if you put that aside, if you have employee-sponsored health care, you are now subject to the lowest quality basement, essentially, of what would be considered health insurance after this law passes. So it used to be, well, David and I go into this, but it really is going to impact, if not tens upon tens of millions. It could very well impact like close to 100 million people. Now, you got to remember, you're also talking about people getting thrown off of Medicaid. You're going to see even more get thrown off of Medicaid if the budget gets into place, because there's more cuts on Medicaid there. They'll come after Medicare eventually. But Medicare is really one of the few things that are untouched in this scenario as of yet. I mean, we're only, 4 months into it, so we'll see. But David and I will get into that. And obviously, we talk about what we play the audio from Montana. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But as you know, Donald Trump has taken his tour to Europe. and having gone from the Middle East to Israel, and then to Europe, where he visited the Pope.
It goes cab drivers. Then you leave the Middle East, the land of the cab driver and the camel and the king. And then you go to the Jew and the moneylender. And then you go to see the ancient old man who likes poor people and tells me I'm fat.
Did you pull that Pope version of the Curb Your Enthusiasm? Oh yeah, you should pull that. It's pretty funny. But then he's made his way to Brussels, and in Brussels, yes, he's very happy now that he's with white people. They all speak strangely. He has the opportunity to shake hands with Emmanuel Macron, recently elected in France. Recall that on this trip alone, he has attempted to basically take Bibi Netanyahu's hand and arm hostage for an extended period of time. Not clear what he wanted to do with it. But as you know, and he still has Neil Gorsuch's arm, I think, in his suit coat pocket. Well, Macron clearly decided that he knows how to play this alpha male game. You'll notice in this handshake that if you look at the hands, Trump tries to release the handshake, and Macron is basically telling him,
We have a lot to discuss, including terrorism and other things, and congratulations, great job.
Thank you very much. Je suis très heureux pour ma part aussi d'être.
Yeah, well, let's do this one more time in slow-mo. Now, remember, according to Donald Trump's worldview, Macron is now the dominant man in this exchange.
Even
and
with that
therefore, America has to, I think, what is the rule? Do we have to buy a lot of like pate or something from them? Or what is it that we're going
need to make a good
croissants
deal for them?
We're not even, no more sliced bread. Croissants only in this country.
Things and congratulations, great job.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to look in your eyes.
The same way
you turn away before I turn away from you.
The same way I marry my drama teacher. The same gut instinct I apply to this handshake.
I know how to deal with someone who is much, much older than me.
I marry old and I cuck old.
They can handle a bit of force.
Let me show you what a real man does when he shakes hands.
When you're a Rothschild banker, you can just go up to them and grab them. Tic-tac, please.
Let me just point out that Donald Trump is married to a much younger woman, and yet everyone feels the need to point it out about Macron.
You don't think we've ever pointed out that Donald Trump is married to someone who's
Melania's
like
younger
quarter
than
of
him?
an age?
Has that ever been mentioned on the show before?
I'm just saying that it's almost every time that Macron gets mentioned, it's the drama teacher thing comes up as though it's like hilarious. But when it's a man, it's not hilarious. It's just like whatever.
Creepy.
Well, in Trump's case, anything is creepy. If Trump had married his drama teacher, that would also be very, very creepy. Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
Can you help me memorize the streetcar named Desire monologue?
All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, David Dayen in studio. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It is a tremendous... We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Seder on the Majority Report in studio. It is a tremendous honor. There's no, I can't say there's any, this is not a special event. I mean, it is a special event, but it's not for any special reason.
The week of digital ads that you put together paid off.
Exactly. We hyped. And David Dayen is in New York City on reporting probably for one of the 45 different publications that he writes for. I don't even know how that's legal. And
I literally am a monopolist. I'm monopolizing all of the nation's
no stories.
media outlets.
There's no stories left because David
very
Dayen,
dependent on me, the national media.
So, David Dayen, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. So I want to talk. I want to go sort of wide-ranging with this. I mean, you have a great piece in. I think it's in the Pacific Standard. Is it no? What?
Wait.
I'm sorry. The Trump obstructing justice. The U.S.
I thought I was here to talk about Seth Rich.
Oh, we.
You told me for days that this is what we were talking about.
That's how we get all our guests on. We tell them that they're going to talk Seth
You said,
Rich.
and I quote, you want to nail those bastards at the DNC.
See, guys.
And that's what I prepared for. I looked at mountains of tape and read transcripts.
Now, I almost feel like we should just end it here because I feel like there's like 10. I can name, well, I mean, I don't know if I can name them, but I know there are like 5 to 10 YouTubers out there who are going to blow this whole exchange up and just like, this is evidence of cover-up.
See?
Well, look, MSNBC asked me to quash this.
Oh.
And so...
Unfortunately,
we have to play the video now that we've recorded it.
So you have the same lack of integrity that Fox News does, and you now have to quash
this
this
I'm
story.
totally quashing it. Fox News backed down. A lot of people apparently backed down after making it. Some people actually just leave their videos up, though, because they continue to make money.
I don't know who that is. I don't know who
it doesn't matter. Anyways... All right, let's start with something. If you really need to start with something a little more sexy, Gianforte, this guy running in Montana, and it's interesting because it works also. There's 2 points I want to talk about. One is, it happens on the eve before the election. Right. About 40% of the people have already voted, is my understanding. At least. All the Montana papers have pulled their endorsements of him this morning. This is one of those things like you cannot know about this. Like, it wasn't like you can't not know about this if you're a voter.
Well,
I think
it's really going to be a test if politics can move at the speed of social media, because obviously this is a huge story that has gotten very big coverage. I assume has gotten big coverage in Montana.
I think it has to.
I don't know.
I mean, that's why the endorsements lead me to believe that the local papers move that quickly.
Yeah. Interestingly, those local papers are all owned by the same corporate
national conglomerate.
Yeah. The Intercept, where I work, did a piece on about how these corporate papers had actually been slandering Rob Quist. And had been, focusing their coverage on Rob Quist's financial difficulties and things like that. And so for them to then rescind the endorsement is even more notable.
I think they probably still want Gianforte to win. They just don't want to be as close to him.
Exactly. And I think one of the rescinded endorsements said, we're still not going to support Quist.
Right.
But we're rescinding the endorsement. But it's... you say that 40%, maybe 50% of the vote has already come in, but there's an expectation that vote trends to Quist, that the early ballots are, and we've seen this in special elections and in the general election last year, that the early votes tend to be more Democratic leaning.
And particularly in this, in a cycle where the enthusiasm is supposedly on the Democratic side.
And so if this incident turns off voters and less voters come to the poll, and that early vote represents a higher proportion of the overall vote, that could actually be good for Quist, even though people are saying, oh, this wasn't, known to the voters who voted at that time, and so it wasn't factored in, so that's bad for Quist. So it actually, perversely, paradoxically, could be good for Quist.
And what's interests me about this is if Quist wins now, the waters are a little bit muddied in terms of, because the whole reason why we're paying this much attention to a congressional race that will have no impact on the actual numbers dynamic or the majorities. Same with Georgia 6th. This is going to have no impact.
Let me say this. The American Health Care Act won by 2 votes, right? And these 2 guys come in, and suddenly the American Health Care Act doesn't win. So, it's certainly possible that this will actually
doesn't win if they have when it comes back to the House.
When it comes back, they're going to come back for another vote. So.
Fair enough. I mean, although I would bet that there were some people who were released because they had those 2 votes.
Probably, but it's hard. It's always hard to make that determination. But,
fair enough. Though I stand corrected.
That vote is on a knife's edge,
right.
And any Democratic addition and pickup. Of course, Gianforte, what he was. Well,
that I want to get to. I want to
yeah.
get to that part about it because there's two elements about this. So if Quist wins, it now muddies the water a little bit as to whether or not this is actually a function of. I mean, of course it is on some level, but it muddies the narratives that a lot of different people were invested in.
Right.
It muddies the narrative of like. You need a populism, Bernie-style approach to win. Right. It muddies the water of there's a big anti-Trump backlash here that's signaling a wave, and if you are voting with Donald Trump and you're in one of those districts, either that voted for Clinton or were just simply close elections, you're in trouble. It muddies that water, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, it makes it a unique race, kind of that you can't draw a lot of conclusions from. I mean, a couple things. From everything I know about the race, and I don't know a ton, Quist was running almost entirely on a message on healthcare. He was running on the American Health Care Act. He was running on the Republican bill. So that's number one. Number two, even the most optimistic reports that I've seen were that Quist had narrowed the race to single digits or 2 points. I had never seen, public or private, any kind of polling showing him winning.
Right.
So if he wins, I think you have to take into account this late in the game assaults.
But the fact that he was that close,
yes,
can be.
Yes, it's important because this is a seat that Trump won by 20 points.
Right.
This is a state that Trump won by 20 points. Of course, Gianforte lost when Trump won. He was running for governor against Steve Bullock and lost. And Gianforte has been running in this state for like a year, nonstop, from the governor's race all the way through to this race. When Ryan Zinke gets out, that's very early on. So he's almost been, in a perpetual campaign, and that probably led to what happened.
I was going to say, I feel like he may have wanted to start just a day later. Because the time for him to have that explosion. Now, then the other point is that the thing that pushed him over the edge was having to answer a question of, in fact, maybe we should, do we have that audio? Can we play that audio now, the Quist audio? I mean, the Gianforte audio?
In fairness to Gianforte, I get really mad about Congressional Budget Office scores, like furious.
I've seen you react to CBO scores, and
it's something that sets me off.
It just drives you absolutely nuts. All right, here is the audio, and this is important because one of the other stories that's going to come out of this, particularly if Gianforte loses, is going to be the Health Care Act literally caused his loss.
It's literally toxic.
It just destroys him. All right, let's listen to it. Now, what you're going to be hearing is the the recorder of Ben Jacobs. He is a reporter for The Guardian. I think we've had him on maybe once or twice over the years.
A British reporter, as many have said,
Well,
even though he's from Baltimore.
Right, he's being attacked because he works for a British paper doing
a foreign correspondent
right.
meddling in our elections.
As opposed to, of course, all of Fox owned by an Australian.
Right.
But
Right.
Be that as it may, here is that audio, and just to give you the sense of the scene, Fox News, national Fox News, is setting up to do an interview
They're
with
in the
Brett
room.
Baer, and they've actually come out with some of the most damning testimonies to what happened.
Because they play it totally straight.
So they're in there for the interview, and apparently Ben Jacobs sees him and has been for a while trying to get him to answer the question about where do you stand on the healthcare bill. And Gianforte has been saying, I need to see the CBO score before I and sadly it came out before his election. So
CBO's their dates, the date of their release, just totally messed up.
Totally messed up.
The CBO score, because you were waiting to make your decision about healthcare until you saw the bill and it just came out. And what you thought
we'll talk to you about that later.
Yeah, but there's not going to be time. I'm just curious if you have the action
speak
right
with
now.
Shane, please.
But you don't.
I'm sick and tired of you guys. The last guy that came in here, you did the same thing. Get the hell out of here. Jesus. Get the hell out of here. The last guy did the same thing. You were the Guardian?
Yes, and you just broke my glasses.
The last guy did the same damn thing.
You just body slammed me and broke my glasses.
Get the hell out of here.
You'd like me to get the hell out of here, I'd also like to call the police. Can I get you guys' names?
Hey, you gotta leave.
He just body slammed me.
You gotta leave.
I mean,
sometimes those voice recorders really, any kind of movement that it makes a lot of noise. So, that could be that.
Two things occurred to me just in terms of like...
was that an Olympus or was that a sharp voice recorder?
What's the kerning on that?
Exactly.
Well, two things occur to me. One is I think every reporter who is using a recording device should be using why not just shoot the video of it too simultaneously?
Well, if you're using a phone, you can
Right.
certainly do that. A lot of I have one.
The digital recorders.
Little digital recorders, and
They're super easy.
It's easier.
Yeah.
They're smaller. They're you don't have to focus or do anything.
Right.
You just
And if somebody slams you're not breaking your phone.
What the campaign said was he aggressively shoved the recorder into Gianforte's face.
It would have been better. I think I would believe that more if Gianforte would have said, don't aggressively shove that in my face. But
that's now been put on later. That's been added to the audio.
It does sound like just so bizarre.
Yeah.
And clearly
it just sounds like a guy on the edge. He's been, as I said, running for a year. He's just done with this. He just wants to get his cushy little thing. He's from Jersey. And he's like some tech guy from Jersey who moved to Montana years ago. It's probably has a summer home there or something. And he just wants his sinecure. He just wants his nice seat in Congress.
And he really didn't want to answer that question of healthcare. And I think one of the things that will come out of this, if Gianforte loses, is that narrative is going to take off.
Absolutely.
Because it's so perfect. I mean, one, it's true. We had the CBO score. You've got 23 million Americans who are going to be out of healthcare. I saw this stat from Sarah Cliff. In states, and just to remind people, the dynamic is this. States can basically take a waiver and opt out, if you will, of the baseline of what constitutes insurance. So we no longer have to have insurance as a product that we all know is in health insurance. We can start selling cars essentially without motors and call them cars.
Right. Well, this actually goes back to what the state of the individual market was before the Affordable Care Act, where there were state-based standards, but some of them were worse than others, and there was a lot of insurance where it was kind of if you got hit by a bus it would help you, but otherwise not so much.
Now, two things I want to just say about that. One is that dynamic happened pre-Obamacare, but what also existed then was federal rules that said you have to be based in that state. to have access to their set of standards.
Right.
When Obamacare passed, that rule basically changed. And so now if I'm in a company in New York and Alabama now says, we just took a waiver. That means that you can almost deny pre-existing conditions. It means that, rescission is on the books. There's an annual cap. There's a lifetime cap. If I'm in New York now as an employer, I can actually just basically say, I'm going to run it through Alabama.
This is very important, and it's baffling to me why the Obama administration allowed that, because that was guidance. That was not written. That was not statutory. That was guidance that was written into the law afterwards by HHS that said, yes, the employer can take the lowest common denominator. They can take the worst
But that's
possible
because
thing.
they felt the lowest common denominator was high enough at
Right.
that point.
They felt that the federal law was going to be the standard and would never change, and so they
nobody
allowed
in Health and
this
Human Services
kind of
thought, like,
thing.
what if Donald Trump gets elected?
Right, or what if any Republican gets elected?
Anybody.
And what if they change the essential benefits standard?
Yep.
It's mind-boggling to me that the Obama administration
Huge
allowed
mistake.
that. But it does show that employer care would be affected by this.
Everybody's
There's
care.
no question about it. And I mean, it's almost more damaging than and more disruptive and intervening in the markets than the Affordable Care Act was.
Oh, yeah. This is going to take us back. This is going to take us to a not even pre-Obamacare.
No,
it's going to take us
worse.
much, much
It's gonna
worse.
be worse.
And, of course, there's going to be bigger cuts to Medicaid. But we were saying that these states can take a waiver. And once they take a waiver and they don't require guaranteed issue, which means that if you have pre-existing conditions, they'll do these state high-risk pools.
Right.
The premiums for people going into those high-risk pools will go up 800%.
Right.
800%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
I'll give you even worse. One incredible line in the CBO report shows it looks at the current law in terms of what someone age 64 would pay and what they would pay under the new law. And it just looks at what the actual cost of insurance is and what their benefit is through the subsidies. Because now it's not based on you only have a percentage that you have to pay yourself. It's a flat benefit that you get, a tax, these tax credits are a flat benefit. They're slightly better based on age, I believe, or based on, no, I think it's based on age, not income. So whereas you would pay $1,000 as someone age 64 who gets, is eligible for the max subsidy, now you would pay $13,000 a year because that tax credit does not go nearly far enough for people in certain situations.
And to earn that tax credit, it necessarily means you're making about $25,000 to $30,000 a year. So half of your income would have to go to that coverage.
I mean, you can set up all sorts of scenarios, but once you know that it does not change with your income, you can set up all sorts of scenarios where this is just going to be unusable, these markets, for people age 50 and 60 or whatever.
Now,
and then when they try to get back into them because they're sick, they can get the coverage, but it can be jacked up
3 times.
It can be jacked up as high as possible.
You get a penalty for 3 times, and then my understanding too is that the difference between old people and young people's coverage can be up to 5 times. I think more.
Yeah, it's the age band has gone from 3 times to 5 times, and so there's no cap on what insurers can charge at all. So I mean,
that baseline
can go up at their discretion.
Now the funny thing about it is that in the out years, premiums go down. And the reason is because it's driven so many people from the market, so many sick people and so many elderly people, that it's basically like going in and, paying health insurance for, I don't know, like 8th graders.
Well, the thing I've been saying is
you
that
just got to cover occasional broken wrist, and that's about it in terms of health.
The thing I've been saying is that the combination of no cap on the increases in premiums and the way in which this whole thing is structured, and the fact that if you have a gap in coverage in those states, then they can charge you this penalty. It creates incentives to raise the baseline, because the more you raise the baseline, the more you price the poor out of the individual market. And we know that that poor people correlate with sick people.
Right.
And so, if you price more of the poor out of the market, you're necessarily going to have a healthier risk pool as an insurer. And when they try to come back, you'll be able to keep them priced out because you're able to increase these penalties.
And so let me ask you this. The conventional wisdom has been that this thing is going to die in the Senate. Maybe that's not the conventional wisdom. But
I saw yesterday that McConnell said they haven't gotten 50 votes yet, that they haven't figured out a way.
50 votes for the House version.
No, 50 votes, period, for any version of health care that can pass, through reconciliation, through the process in the Senate. They don't have it yet. And they know it's going to take a while to figure out. I mean, we saw how this played out in public on the Democratic side.
Right.
And they needed 60 votes. They needed every single member of their caucus to get this done. And it played out very publicly in terms of the favor trading and all this stuff. It's playing out the same way. It's just not really happening in public right now on the Senate side, and they might not get there at all. And, this race in Montana and the race in Georgia, the 6th district.
Has healthcare become
it's going to be important.
Is it been much of an issue in Georgia?
I don't know that it's been as much of an issue in Georgia. I know that it's been the main issue in Montana. I don't have a good handle on what the issues are in Georgia. But neither of these have been very heavily Trump. Trump's kind of been the background to all of this in these. You almost don't have to raise his name because he's ever present.
Because everybody knows he's there.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. You don't have to run ads about Trump. It's not necessary. So, I know that Quist hasn't really been talking a lot about Trump on the stump, and Ossoff either. They've just allowed themselves to work within this environment where everyone knows, what is happening day to day in the White House.
Do you think that more broadly speaking, on a national level, that there is? I mean, look, there's a big divide in the Democratic Party. I mean, I think it's possible to overstate it, or it's possible to overstate the depth, or, I don't know. Or the relevance at this point, but
there's a big divide on the Twitter.
Well, that's the thing, is that,
I don't know that it plays through necessarily to the electorate writ large, like the rank and file. I mean, we'll see. I think it's an important fight, I think, in terms of what will get accomplished in the aftermath of this.
Right. I mean, let's just talk about that dynamic a little bit, because I actually am of the mind, and maybe I have to be, that the outcomes of these things, not necessarily the elections, but the outcomes, legislative outcomes and whatnot, are really driven by a very small group of people. I mean, relatively speaking, it doesn't have to be 20 million people.
Right.
You see, net neutrality was basically 3 million people activated, and it overcame, a lot, I think, in terms of, and so, I'm one who feels quite strongly about preaching to the choir, because the choir is really the ones they're doing the bake sales.
Right.
They're doing they may not fill the pews, but the pews are those, that's once a week.
Right.
The rest of the time, the church has to run, and somebody gets to choose, how are we going to paint the chapel? And, is that type of thing. And so, and that fight seems to be more about that, like what the people in, and it's funny too, because I think Russia works that way too. The whole intrigue. I think elected Republican officials, feel the pressure of these probes more than they would if they were outside of Washington.
Right.
But it has very good it provides very good sort of outcomes for the rest of us because they're feeling that pressure.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, one thing you're going to see is we have these two special elections. One of them certainly is running in a more populist direction, and one is running in a more conciliatory direction. We don't know how that's going to manifest when they actually get to Congress,
right?
If they actually get to Congress. But there are narratives that you can, take forward from this. I think maybe a better indicator of all this is going to be the primary in Virginia between Tom Perriello and Ralph Northam, who's the lieutenant governor. Perriello running on a very strong populist anti-monopoly track. Northam kind of a centrist, kind of where Virginia politics has been for a while. The Kane, McAuliffe, Mark Warner kind of entity. And so I think that's the indicator of where will you see a shift here in what the Democratic Party's emphases are going to be.
Because elected Democrats look at that race, they know where the Virginia has been.
Right. Virginia's kind of the ultimate laboratory. I mean, it's a purple state. We know where the politics have been, as you just said, and this would be an indicator of where the politics are going.
I know you were following there was a big push to talk about monopolies and antitrust. I think that was, had we seen a Clinton administration, I feel like that would be the equivalent to income inequality. In terms of like the narrative that we hear about, and
I think it still is to a degree, but
it's still
obviously
going
the
on,
Trump thing
right.
has kind of overtaken it. But you're right that there were going to be some major fights, particularly around the role of Silicon Valley and platform monopolies, that was going to dominate economic policy thinking within the Clinton administration, because of course, the same kind of gridlock was going to be manifest in terms of Congress. But this is something that gets done at the administrative level, at the law enforcement level.
And so where is that now? I mean, I know, like, I see Franken's even talking about this too. I mean,
well, Franken has always been good on these media mergers.
Right, because he was in the middle of that big Sin-Fin thing in '96. Right. With the Telecommunications
Maybe
Act.
For the people who aren't professionals.
I think our audience is quite familiar with Sin-Fin. We've talked about that a lot. No, that was in 1996, the Telecommunications Act, among other things, loosening all sorts of different ownership requirements. And one of the things that it did was it ended the prohibition of producers of television to be also the owners of the pipes, essentially. Right. So, I mean, it's really sort of very similar to a net neutrality type of situation. Of
Common carriage.
Of course, the dynamic is different. But at that time, NBC, CBS, ABC, they didn't own their own product. They would buy product from
each other, essentially.
Each other, yeah.
I mean, CBS would do shows and sell them to ABC.
There were independent studios.
There were some independents, but a lot of it was to each other.
Yeah, Paramount and Sony,
Sure.
and but yes, you would buy an ABC Productions. They would call it Rhinestone or whatever it was, and they said, look, you can relax these rules. The bottom line, we're still going to put on only the best shows. We're not going to buy just from ourselves.
Right.
And of course, they ended up buying just from themselves. I mean, some of the worst, like Union Square. I don't know if you remember that show, but that was a classic example of, in fact, the Jim Belushi show, which I was in the original pilot.
See, you hear that name drop, people?
That was a little bit of a name drop.
Yeah, I was in the Jim Belushi show pilot.
I realized, like, on the night of the taping, I actually heard from a friend of mine who knew the ABC executives. They said the funniest part of that show was the look on my face in Act 3 when I realized this show's going to get picked up. Because I realized, like, oh, shit, what did I get? Because usually what I would do is do pilots that I thought have no chance of getting picked up because you get paid an extraordinary amount of money, particularly back then.
For just pilots.
For just a pilot. I could make my entire nut in a 3-week period of time where they would put me up at the Chateau Marmont, and that's it. That was done. And I realized because
it was owned and operated.
And it was a former executive who was now the head of the production company. I knew the whole thing was.
But yeah, I mean, Franken's carried that through in the Comcast merger with NBC. He was very strong on. He was very strong on Time Warner, AT&T, which is currently in talks. Interestingly, the big one now, and I've written about this, is the Sinclair Broadcasting Tribune merger, which we talked about.
Yeah.
They got it. However, I believe this week there has been a court challenge to the FCC rule change that enabled the Sinclair Tribune deal to occur. This is that UHF discount rule that they reinstated. And there's been now a court challenge to that saying that it's ridiculous. I mean, we talked about why the UHF discount, I guess we can recapitulate that.
Redo it because I think that was on Ring of Fire.
What happened was Sinclair Broadcasting is this huge conglomerate, owns a lot of local stations, Fox stations, ABC stations, independent stations, all over the country.
They played the John Kerry documentary about
Stolen Honor.
Yes,
they played that. And they are I think they have 163 stations
They're
across
worse
the country.
than Fox, folks. I mean, Fox was sort of vying against them.
Yes.
Fox had
They made a deal during the Trump campaign to give him access. They made an access for favorable coverage deal with the Trump campaign during the campaign. All these local stations all over the country.
That's right.
So they bought Tribune Broadcasting, which has outlets in New York, Pix 11. It has outlets in Los Angeles, KTLA 5. It has Chicago, WGN, the superstation. This would put them now in 70% of U.S. homes. And that's supposed to be illegal. The number is supposed to be 39%. No one television owner can be in more than 39% of U.S. homes.
Because these are owner-operated stations. They're not like NBC. I mean, and frankly, 70% of I mean, that is, I don't even know. There's maybe a handful of cable outlets that even have 70% clearance. I don't even think
Fox necessarily has 70% clearance. So the reason this was enabled is because Ajit Pai, is the head of the FCC now, came in and made a rule change called the UHF discount. This was back in the day. UHF stations were counted as half of a station. When you
Matt,
go
do you know what a UHF station is? Matt has no idea.
Of course he has no idea.
No
So UHF stands for ultra high frequency.
Yeah.
And these are the stations that were, during over-the-air broadcasting, were high on the dial.
Yeah, I mean,
they were not affiliated typically with ABC, NBC, CBS. They were these extra stations that you would get as a bonus.
They not only were always like less than regional even, but you had to configure your television. So it's like you had one dial.
An antenna.
There was two dials.
Yeah, a VHF dial and a UHF dial.
And you would turn your clicker, would give you like 1 through 12.
Right.
Or 2 through 12. For some reason, nobody did 1. And then there was another one that was almost like a radio
13
dial.
and up. Yeah.
that like you had to, and that would be like channel 27 in
just,
Worcester.
And just as we're talking about this, you see how ridiculous it is in a digital environment to have any kind of discount for a UHF
It's absurd.
station.
It's delivered in exactly the same fashion and could very well be. I mean, I got to tell you, if you live in anywhere rural, those UHF stations that were UHF stations then, they're now like 1 through 10 on your cable channel. They don't even. They don't
look like Spectrum 1. I mean, so immediately what this did was, before the Tribune merger, Sinclair was at about 39%. They were at that ceiling. After this UHF discount rule comes back in, they immediately go back down to 25%. So that gives them this headroom to buy Tribune. It was tailored completely for the type of media mergers that Sinclair was doing.
I
And
mean, not
now-
even the type.
Yeah, it's that.
It was just for that.
And so there's this court challenge now. So that's actually
Who's
kind of
bringing that
interesting.
court challenge?
You know, I didn't read the entire story, but I'll keep on.
It's got to be like those like Martin Amori, or it's like some of those
Marvin Amori,
Marvin
yeah,
Amori
maybe,
guys.
maybe.
I mean, that's really important. I mean, Sinclair is really the worst.
Yeah.
I mean,
so like Boris Epstein, who was a surrogate during the campaign, he is their senior political analyst at Sinclair.
They are honestly
yeah.
the worst. And so that's this is the type of stuff. I mean, I think like, you know, we're coming out of the agencies and stuff like that is the most sort of difficult. Well, look, I know we only just got just a couple
a little
of minutes.
time.
Okay. All right. I, you know, because you're in New York, and I know you got people to meet and whatnot.
Yeah.
Let's just briefly just touch on the Trump didn't have to obstruct justice.
Right.
I mean, where this latest thing with Jeff Sessions, where he didn't put on a security form, and it's one thing to lie in your hearings, right? Like I misspoke or this and that, and I took an oath, but I had my fingers crossed underneath. But on these forms, you literally sign a statement that says, I know if I give wrong information, false information on this form, it's a felony.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't get much more. And now
I'm sure Sessions will get right on that to
I was gonna
prosecute
say,
himself.
do you think the Attorney General of the United States will bring a case against Jeff Sessions?
Probably not. And that goes kind of down the line, and where we're at in America since particularly in the last decade is that there's a different set of rules if you have wealth and power in terms of law enforcement, and we've seen it time and again, and there are a lot of reasons for that. I'm going to plug a book. There's a very good book coming out about all of this by Jesse Eisinger.
I already have it on my list.
ProPublica. I'm about halfway through it. It's terrific.
Is it good? Okay. Chicken Shit.
It's called the Chicken Shit Club, and that actually comes from James Comey. James Comey, when he was the head of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, brought all the attorneys together, and he said to them, how many of you have never lost a case? And about half of them very proudly raised their hands, and he goes, we call you guys the Chicken Shit Club because you're not willing to take a case that you might lose. And that has become the mentality inside the Department of Justice and these satellite U.S. attorneys' offices. They're petrified of losing. They've had a lot of pushbacks from both lobbyists in the corporate world. They've had pushbacks from Congress on behalf of lobbyists in the corporate world. They've had pushbacks from administrations. They kind of feel under siege. They don't get the same resources for white-collar crime and white-collar prosecutions that go to anti-terror prosecutions, for example. By the way, this is a special counsel Robert Mueller is running. However, he still needs to make resource requests into the Justice Department. He still, Rod Rosenstein still essentially has a decision-making role with respect to Mueller.
Mueller is just like
for charging.
the 52nd state U.S. attorney, but
Exactly.
with a little bit more juice.
Exactly. And so, the idea that we're going to come out of this the way we came out of Watergate with Haldeman and Ehrlichman and Charlie Colson going to jail is really fanciful in my view, no matter what it was. And that's why I say that Trump really didn't, the weirdest thing about this is that Trump really didn't have to obstruct justice. He didn't have to shut down an investigation at the FBI because the natural state of things and the way we do law enforcement in this country would have shut it down by itself.
I mean, he has got psychological problems. I mean, that's basically why he did that, I think.
Yes.
It wasn't something that was particularly well thought out. It seems to me. But so is there, I mean, have you spoken to people who have ideas as to what can happen institutionally with, let's just say, U.S. attorneys? Like, obviously, if Jeff Sessions is your attorney general, you've got a problem. Right. And frankly, the biggest institutional change, it seems to me, would be to get rid of the Republican Party. Now, with that said, we also had a Democratic administration.
You got to be honest here.
That's what I'm saying.
In the George W. Bush administration, we had very significant prosecutions of
Enron,
WorldCom, Tyco, of all these accounting scandals. They actually did the job. It was diligent. There were some cases through that time. The Arthur Andersen case, for example, where that firm got indicted and eventually went out of business.
Yep.
And there was tremendous pushback to that, saying that the Justice Department went too far, and all of these people working at Arthur Andersen. Oh, this is part of the book. There was tremendous pushback. That, by the way, it's all of those people still had, companies still had to be audited. All those people still got work.
Of course.
This was not this
that
massive
was more of a
job loss.
It was more of a shareholder complaint, right? I mean,
there was another thing where at a suit against KPMG, which was another auditor, also falsifying records. I mean, Arthur Andersen, by the way, they shredded Enron documents, and there's documented evidence that they did it because they were worried about
their own culpability.
Their own culpability. They literally shredded documents. This
and
is a company that
deserves
to
deliver the.
These are auditors. Yes.
To deliver, but didn't they
accurate financial statements?
But didn't they also deliver like the voting for the Oscars?
Well, that's not them. Okay, that was PricewaterhouseCoopers. But yes, they deserved the corporate death penalty.
Of course.
They rampantly violated standards. KPMG case, the Justice Department got slapped down because they claimed that they pressured KPMG to not pay the legal bills for their executives. They capped the legal bills at a certain amount. And a federal judge said, well, now you're violating their right to an attorney. I didn't know the right to an attorney meant that your company would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for your lawyer. Like that somehow, that's not part of when a guy gets picked up for selling a joint. There's not hundreds of thousands of dollars that you pay for top flight attorneys kind of standard, but there is in the corporate world now because of that ruling. So there were a lot of rulings that happened in the wake of actual aggressive treatment against the corporate sector that not just rulings, but pushback that led to the Obama administration doing jack.
I think you could draw a line from that Arthur Andersen to Holder and Lanny
Brewer. It created too big to jail. It created too big to jail and collateral consequences.
Yes.
This idea that we can't do anything with the banks because the poor bank teller down there. This is not something that we say like the murderer's family is going to suffer if the breadwinner goes to jail.
Right.
We never say that.
We have never not sent a killer to jail because they have a child.
Right. Exactly.
Or forget killer. We've never not sent a two-time pot offender.
And the
to jail.
point is that if J.P. Morgan Chase is so dependent on Jamie Dimon that his loss sends the company entirely into a tailspin, they have bigger problems.
Well, and then also I would say is he's that much more culpable.
Exactly.
I mean, if if he can sink the company, then he's got to take responsibility for what the company does.
Exactly.
So what is there an institutional reform that can, or is it just like stuff like antitrust and anti-monopoly and income and?
I think with all of this stuff, I think you need to increase the will and ability on the part of the federal prosecutors to take on these types of cases. We know there's going to be massive pushback whenever they try to take on a large bank, a large lender, a company like Volkswagen or something like that. I think there are actual statutory things that we can do, like getting rid of these deferred prosecution agreements and these things that push towards settlement. In the late Obama administration, there was this guidance called the Yates Memo that said that we have to hold individuals responsible and that there are these standards around that. Those kinds of things, they're not sexy, but it's the internal guidance for the U.S. attorneys that is as important as anything, because it really sets the direction. And that guidance has not been revoked at this point by the Sessions Justice Department. I don't know that it's being adhered to.
I just think they can't find it.
It's but changing the mentality sometimes starts with just changing that guidance and what is expected of these people.
And I think also just like lessening the power of these corporations and
that
the
too.
size.
That too. I mean, yeah,
right.
you bring the antitrust into it. Right. Yeah, you got to. Yeah, absolutely.
David, this was a real pleasure to have you in studio. I know you live in California, but maybe you should just make it a little more of a regular thing.
Well, hopefully next time you actually tell me what we're talking about correctly, and I don't do all of this work on Sethridge, and then I come here and we're talking about this other stuff that doesn't matter. It's compared to this shocking
I know
inside job that was undertaken.
David came in here with literally, he's got
I have charts, I have placards.
He's got all the stuff too from
I literally have an entire poster board that I did little threads,
the DNC,
like just connecting the dots, literally.
The DNC lawsuit
that's right.
Dossier that you had.
I had tapes, I had transcripts, I was going to set up here. Black is white and white is black. We are through the looking glass, people.
It's called a tease. So that way, next time you come on, we're definitely going to do that stuff. All right, David Dayen, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Yes, thank you, David. He's walking out of the office. Actually, he's been gone for an hour. I just wanted to see if that would connect. Before we go into the fun half, we have some pretty disturbing audio, I guess, that has been unearthed that I am not prepared to comment on at this time. But, I'm going to comment on it, okay? The fact is, Matt is always getting in my face about stuff around here. He is one of these... one of these types of employees that always wants to go to the bathroom or occasionally wants to go to the bathroom and expects me as an employer. Well, whatever. The point is, it's always on me as the proprietor of this outfit to make sure that everything's okay. And so we had a slight altercation because he was getting too aggressive about things, and let's just play the audio since it's going to get released anyways.
Order more toilet paper? Sam, did you order more toilet paper?
I'll get to it.
We're on the last roll.
Yeah, I got it! Just leave me alone about that stuff!
You broke my Game Boy.
Yeah. Sorry about the Game Boy.
How many is that, Sam? Be honest.
Well, that's like the 7th Game Boy I've had to buy. And
you
know
got
what?
to take some accountability.
Not easy to find them now. You got to go onto eBay. All right, 646-257-3920 is the phone number. 646-257-3920 is the number. We're going to move into the fun half of the program. Folks, a reminder, it is your membership that keeps this program going. You can become a member today at jointhemajorityreport.com. Just pennies a day. Theoretically, that could be trillions of dollars if you had it all in pennies. But it's not. It's not even close to $1 trillion. And really, what is $1 trillion? They were $2 trillion off on the budget. So we're not even close to $2 trillion. We're just talking about like a quarter a day. 30 cents. I don't know. It depends on how you calculate it.
You know, it was amazing. King Salman told me that he ran his whole complex on literally pennies a day. That was the way he thought of it.
Pennies a day.
Unbelievable.
folks, join themajorityreport.com. And as our way of saying thank you, we give you extra content virtually every day, nearly every day, almost every day, every day. Every day. Well, we're taking Monday off. So that's why I'm thinking about that, and it's just sort of sticking in my craw. But I have an announcement to make. If you're a member of this program, you are going to be receiving an email soon with information regarding the special 17-minute behind-the-scenes video made by film guy Matthew, and it is an amazing piece of work. Kelly doesn't feel comfortable with it, but she doesn't like it, apparently. But it's worth it to see it just that. But it's for members only. So you will get an email about that, and you will enjoy it. But generally what we do is just give you an extra hour or two every day of content. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. Get 10% off. On top of that, folks, if you buy your crap from Amazon or jet.com, do it through our link at majorityreportkickback.com. Majorityreportkickback.com. You use those links always. You will notice no difference. We always get a kickback. That's why we call it Majority Report Kickback. 646-257-3920. Take your calls in just a moment.